A lot of people find this hard to believe that are not in this community, that this type of information exists. But I'm always here to show you guys that it does. And alrighty, what's going on, everybody? So, in today's video breakdown, I want to go over this Bitcoin trade for you guys, how I made a quick $1,000 scalp today, covering the fundamentals, obviously, of course, layering them, showing you guys yet again how all the buy confluences that I look for when I'm entering into a position to give myself an advantage or an edge in these markets played out yet again today to the T. So if you've been on these Zoom calls with me where I've been breaking down these trade analysis on Bitcoin and how I've been able to scalp the markets, it's going to seem repetitive because like I mentioned, I look for the same exact confluences and today they played again. They played out again to show you all how you had information and advantage through the fundamental report, through the delta zones to pay attention to where you should be entering and exiting in these markets. Always showing you guys that here at CYPRX, we're 10,000 steps ahead of the curve. So before we even get into that, for you crypto investors, for you crypto traders. Let me freaking show you guys how even here at CypherX, in terms of just dollar cost averaging into projects before everybody else catches on, we're even doing that. And we've done that, I mean, so many times in this community, it's not even funny. I mean, so I came across this fundamental piece here. As you guys know, myself and Kevin, one of the DeFi mentors in the community, have been predominantly talking about this project, Say, right? And so just yesterday, this blew my mind and just confirms what we're doing here at CypherX and the research that we provide, in my personal opinion, and just goes to show that what we're talking about here is not hopium, it's not hype, it's like it's what people, in my personal opinion, should be paying attention to, but what the vast majority of people are not. Trump's World Liberty Finance buys $775,000 worth of Say in an altcoin buying spree yesterday on April 13th, 2025. Not to toot my own horn, but to show you guys that you're in a community that delivers you this information in advance. What were we doing back on April 1st? I literally dropped over 20 fundamental documents for you guys, which I want to go over today because we did not cover Say yet. And I just want to kind of show you not all the gems that I found on Say, but just kind of, enlightening you on why I added it to my portfolio at the beginning of April. And so here is that research. I always like to show you guys timestamps. Tuesday, April 1st. I sat down on my computer for about an hour and I dropped over 20 plus research videos, articles, links, everything that I was looking at on Say, going over little tiny screenshots, little tiny gems that I found, a whole bunch of panel discussions and interviews with the CEO, the COO, developers. I even came across this one interview that just dropped roughly about 3 weeks ago with Say in the SEC, right? SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce jumped on an interview with, I believe, a core developer from Say Labs to discuss and talk about, crypto in America. Interestingly enough, when we get over into the fundamental side of things, you're going to see Say is trying to do something extremely massive for the genetics niche in America, putting over 15 million Americans' genetics or DNA onto the blockchain. I'll get into that in just one second. And so, seeing all these things and piecing them together and seeing the developments and that nobody on the internet was really talking about this, I decided to add it to my portfolio. And when I did that, you guys can see yet again more timestamps on April 7th, 2025 at roughly about 7:48 a.m. I said to you guys, here are my new active DCA levels. And if you go down and you look at where I mentioned Say was hovering at about 14 cents. So if we go over and we look at the charts, okay, 14 cents is where this green circle was. So we bought at the local bottom, right? And from where price action is currently sitting at now, you're looking at about 28% gains, which is nothing too significant. But, let's say, for example, yesterday was the day that Trump's World Liberty Finance bought into Say. Here in this community, we were buying days in advance if you're paying attention to detail, right? So we're not here in this community just going in and getting into these projects willy-nilly just because we feel like it. First, we do research, we lay the foundation, we build the conviction, then we assess the risk, and then we wait for discounted opportunities and we pull the trigger. There's an actual strategy, an actual process. And even if the assets that we're dollar cost averaging into long term don't perform well, we're still clearly showing that in the short term, we are still capitalizing on market opportunity. And that's what's important, right? So I just wanted to bring that to your attention to show you guys, like, yet again, it doesn't matter if you're a trader in this community, a dollar cost averager, or a DeFi investor, there's so much money to be made and opportunities to take advantage of in the CYPRX community. So let's just transition real fast before we get into today's report. I'm not going to read too much in detail. I'm just going to kind of utilize it to show you all how I built the foundation to take my trade today. Alrighty, Bitcoin trade. As always, I like to start with the institutional deltas just to show you guys that you had levels given to you all in advance before the price action played out. A lot of people find this hard to believe that are not in this community, that this type of information exists. But I'm always here to show you guys that it does. And, that holy grail that most retail investors and traders are looking for, in my personal opinion, can be found in this community. And one of those ways is through these institutional deltas, these institutional pockets of liquidity and trap volume in the markets that retail traders cannot see through TradingView or their everyday average retail crypto exchange that they're trading and investing on, right? So here in this community, you guys are always given an edge, whether it's through research, fundamentals, or technical analysis. On April 13th, 2025, these were the most recent and relative institutional updated deltas. However, these zones were given to us literally over a week in advance, all the way back here when Scalper had delivered institutional deltas in previous weeks. This is back from April 9th. And you can see some of the institutional deltas that are going to play an important role in today's breakdown. This is back when price action was trading around $77,000 per Bitcoin. You can see an institutional sell delta at around the $84,228 mark. And so that was back on April 9th. Now fast forward to down here at the most recent institutional delta updates, you can see that price action was hovering at and around the 84228 psychological level or delta zone. All right. And so again, just trying to show you guys that you had this information in advance. Make sure that you're setting alerts and alarms for these specific channels, pairs that you trade, or just asking Scalper for updates if you need them. All right. So that way you stay ahead of price action. Writing out my report and doing my technical analysis to show you guys first that we had the institutional deltas. Then I go in and I layer fundamentals. When I woke up this rising at about 7 a.m. my time, okay, I woke up, I did my fundamental analysis, and I came to the conclusion that the intraday sentiment was still risk on. As you can see in this report, I'm not going to read too thoroughly through it, but you can see key terminology that it says here: global markets open in the new week, leaning risk on for now. With the total crypto asset volume jumping about 30 billion intraday and equity futures green across the board, what explains this resilience? And I went in detail, giving you all different examples as to what was creating a risk on market mood intraday for today's New York session, or today's daily candlestick, give or take, right? From Asia session, London, and then rolling over into today's New York session. Okay, so make sure that you guys thoroughly go through and read through this. I'm not going to waste too much time today to go over this, but I just wanted to show you guys that I trade in the direction of information that I give you guys, and I'm not just making this stuff up. So if you go in and you look at when I dropped this report to you all, this rising, it took place before the trade played out. So if we come down here in the Cypress analysis section, I dropped this to you guys at 8:45 a.m. today. All right. So if we go and we look at the charts, when the trade today played out, I dropped the report to you guys when price action was right here at 8:45 a.m. All right. So just that way you guys can see that I'm not doing this hindsight. I woke up this rising, gathered my analysis, slapped some deltas on the charts, and then waited patiently for price action to show me that buyers were back in control. right? Which then I can go in, I can add my fundamental bias to the markets to give me further confirmation that the direction that I'm looking to trade in is the direction that's most likely going to play out. And then I can assess my risk and take the trade, right? So after doing my report this rising, now let's get into the technical analysis aspect of it, which in our private community chat with some of the profitable CYPRX members, I just want to show you guys here. I was even talking about this today, where I said, I'm waiting to see if buyers can hold this or if sellers can overpower. This was right before I entered into the position, and I was looking at this price action. Okay. And so if we go over to Bitcoin, this is the 1 minute chart. You guys obviously know that the deltas are already in place. So here's that delta level. You can see the coordinates on this, the 84228 psychological level, which I showed you guys. You guys had back from the 9th of April. And then yesterday on the 13th of April, when Scalper had updated the deltas, right? And so what I was paying attention to today, let's go a little bit to the higher time frame and slap on some session indicators. Okay. What I was paying attention to is that yesterday during Asia session, or I say yesterday because Asia session for us here in Texas was Sunday, but for you guys on the other side of the world, it's still today for you. However, just Asia session yesterday, taking into account everything that I've taught you guys in previous breakdowns in the CYPRX 2.0. We want to be buyers from where institutions showed buy interest during previous sessions. And so if we look not only at the deltas, but where institutions during previous sessions, i.e. Asia, here in this area, right? London, here in this area, we're buying from, we can see clear pent-up demand, not only at this institutional delta during Asian session, where you can see institutions push price action down into the delta, buyers came in, defended, overpowered sellers, and that was enough momentum to push price action from an A to B move, breaking all previous bearish structure. And so coming into this New York session, when I did my fundamental analysis and I started looking at technicals, I saw that. And so this was a key area of interest, not only where the deltas came in, not only where a triple moving average crossover came in, but also where Asia session institutions were able to facilitate enough buy orders to overpower sellers. And so I marked this area of interest off as an area, taking my box tool from the candlestick bodies down to the wick low and extending it over to New York session to say to myself, okay, this is an area of interest that if price action can come back down into, I want to be a buyer from, right? Now moving over here to London session, pretty much the same thing as the previous breakdown that I did for you guys on Bitcoin. I look for where London session bought from. And you can see clear as day, London session buyers push price action down into this 84228 psychological level. Institutions came in, defended their buy orders, and pushed price action back above sellers. They came back down to retest and buy one more time before pricing or passing price action over to New York, right? So without even having to draw a new area of interest, we can see clear as day that London session was also buying from these areas. So simply all I did when we were coming over here into New York session, gathering my fundamental analysis, my temporary bias was to the upside, right? You guys can even see that I play both sides of the market. So in the first half of this report, I mentioned to you guys the sentiment was risk on, and I even highlight for now, right? Letting you guys know that the sentiment could shift, which is kind of clearly what we're seeing right now, as sellers are slightly overpowering buyers that recently came in over the last 24 hours, right? As you progress through this fundamental analysis, I continue to mention to you guys, for now, keep in mind, this sentiment could shift at any moment, right? So New York session today, let's just replay this so that way you guys aren't being manipulated right now by seeing the sells. Why was I taking buys? First off, let's just think logically. Imagine how many retail investors have their candlesticks turn green. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing if you can control your mentality, but most people cannot. Most retail traders that don't understand that colors are utilized as a tool by the elites to manipulate the masses are seeing green candlesticks. So coming into this New York session, all the retail traders are seeing, oh my gosh, bullish candlesticks during Asia, bullish candlesticks during London, bullish candlesticks as the New York session opened, I'm going to start to facilitate buys. Ain't wrong. Here at CYPRX, we know that we do not want to be buying at a premium. And you can see clear as day when the New York session opened, not only was price action at a premium from where both Asia down here and London down here at the institutional delta was buying, but also that price action was briefly slightly away from the institutional sell delta. So all I simply did this rising to catch this trade was set a small alert and alarm to let me know that price action was back down at a discount. So I set it right above the delta. Once price action came back down into a discount, because again, based off the CYPRX 2.0 material, we want to be buying where previous banks and institutions bought from. I waited. Once price action came down into the delta, I then dropped down to the lower time frame to look for an entry. And what we want to look for on the lower time frame, once price action comes to our area of interest and comes down into a delta, is the institutional pattern, which I've shown you guys is this so many times. We want to see price action come into, so let's say this box is our area of interest, right? If we're looking for buys and our bias for that day is buys, we want to see price action come down into our area of interest, set a trap. We want to see buyers try to make an attempt to overpower sellers. We want to see them fail at that attempt. We want to see sellers liquidate early buyers one more time, then buyers come in, overpower sellers, and see a break of structure. Once we see this formation, we then know that buyers are now back in control at a delta zone, an institutional buying area. And if this area also coexists over to the left-hand side, where Asia session, I'm going to put an A, and London session with an L, we're buying from, we can say, oh my gosh, Cyprus has told me so many times that banks like to buy at a discount from where previous banks are buying from, and now I see the institutional pattern at and around these delta zones. All that's left for you to do is wait for two decisive patterns, right? Because we don't know which pattern is going to play out next, but we know that in order for market makers to push price higher, they must do one of two things. And that is retrace price action back down to give themselves another discount to then look for buys, or see a small retracement to find some type of support for institutions to defend and buy again, right? And so what I do once price action starts to retrace is I start to facilitate buy stops, right? I look for a stop loss nice and tight underneath the manipulative low. And I look for previous targets or sells or premium areas where I can take profit from to gather myself a sound, solid risk to reward ratio, right? That's simply all I did this rising. So if you go in and you look at the price action, plain and simple. Here's the delta with the red line. Don't forget this white box is the area of interest where we saw Asia session and London session buyers come in. And so right here is the institutional pattern. You can see market makers came in, set a trap, liquidated that trap, buyers came in, they matched the sell momentum, and now you can see here, buyers defended their positions. If sellers were still in control, we would have made a new low and we would have broken and sellers would have overpowered buyers and pushed price action below the delta. However, that did not happen. You can see here my annotation from this rising, I signaled a higher low, right? And so this is a higher low where buyers continuing to defend and push price action up higher, signaling that they're no longer interested in liquidating leverage positions that exist beneath lows. Logically speaking, the only other area they're going to target is what? Over leveraged positions above sellers. If they're not going to target lows anymore, they're going to target sells, right? And so then all I did was I started to facilitate buy stops above these bearish candlesticks with a nice tight stop loss originally beneath this low. And I simply went in to target the very bottom of this sell delta, right? Trading from delta to delta. After that, the market flipped bullish, entered me in with a buy stop. I was in slight drawdown for maybe about 5 minutes, not even. And then buyers came in. We also had a triple moving average crossover here. We can kind of get rid of those now. And we can see that price action traded from delta to delta, Not being overly aggressive, not being freaking greedy, not thinking that price action is going to give me 100,000 pips in one trading day, simply just taking profit after highs are violated, after price action trades from a delta to a delta, and after I get a nice solid risk to reward ratio. And as mentioned in the private report, I told you guys that this sentiment could shift on the drop of a dime, which is why I try to teach you all to be reactive and not marry a bias. Because now, imagine if I was thinking that this price action was going to trade like this, right? Do something crazy and overextensive, unrealistic, like most retail traders. My trade position today would have been completely stopped out if I would have held this. Whereas you can see, price action turned around from a delta, came back down, and now we can see that buyers and sellers are going to battle it out again at and around this institutional dark pool. And I'm thinking most likely right now sellers might overpower and start to push price action back down. All right, we'll see. But this was a very simplistic, easy to understand breakdown, nothing too complex. The fundamental confluences, the technical confluences that I look for to give myself an edge in these markets played out yet again to the T, showing you guys why I have such a high win rate. It's not because I'm sitting here trying to make this stuff up. It's simply because I only expose myself to the markets when I see these things. We get institutional deltas in advance. I put them on the charts. I wake up in the morning early enough to do a fundamental analysis. I read 15 to 20 freaking fundamentals to gather my insights, right? I condense them in a report for you guys so you don't have to do this the same freaking painful ass analysis I do every morning. Hopefully it helps. Once I have that, then I go in, and if my bias for the day is bullish, I'm like, okay, today's a day I can trade. If I would have gathered an analysis today that the sentiment predominantly was going to be risk off, I would have just taken the day off. I'd have been like, all right, I'm not trading today. I'll let the market sort itself out. But because I saw a risk on sentiment this morning when I did my analysis, I was like, okay, all that's left for me to do is see a setup, a trap, a sweep of that liquidity, a shift in momentum, and a push away from the deltas that break structure and higher lows coming in after that then give me the green light somewhere over to the right hand side to look for an entry to take profit at a premium. Super simple, right? And so, yet again, just another quick $1,000. If I wanted to be done trading for the rest of the week, I could be, right? Quick $1,000 in a week. It's nothing extensive. I'm not here flashing freaking Lamborghinis. I'm just here to show you guys that this shit is possible week after week after week.